Okay, let's talk about what's happening high up in the Himalayas on what they call the roof of the world. A pretty serious crisis is unfolding in Ladakh, and this is a place that's hugely important strategically. So we're going to break down what's really driving this conflict and why it matters way beyond those mountains. So, back in September of 2025, things in Ladakh really hit a boiling point. You had this renowned activist getting arrested, protests just exploded, and in the clashes that followed, well, at least 4 people were killed. This wasn't just another demonstration. This was the spark that kicked off a major crisis. So, what exactly happened on the ground there? Let's start with the immediate stuff, the events that really ignited this whole crisis right on the border. And the most tragic part of those first clashes was the loss of life. We're talking 4 people confirmed killed. This happened when security forces opened fire on demonstrators in Leh, which is the region's main town. That right there is a really stark indicator of just how severe things got and how fast. And the situation on the ground, it just descended into chaos really quickly. You had demonstrators clashing directly with security forces, a paramilitary vehicle was set on fire, even the local office of the ruling BJP party was burned. I mean, dozens were injured, protesters and police. So the authorities responded by slapping on curfews and shutting down the internet, basically trying to get a lid on the situation. But listen, this kind of anger, it doesn't just pop up overnight, right? To really get how things got to this point, we've got to dig into the roots of all this frustration. And it's really a story about a promise that a lot of people in Ladakh feel was broken. Okay, so to really grasp the core issue here, you have to understand the Dakh's political status. It's what's called a union territory. Now, what that means is it's run directly by India's central government in Delhi. So it has way less local control, less autonomy than a full-fledged state does. A good way to think about it is it's more like a federal district than a state that has its own elected government. All right, this timeline really lays out the road to this crisis. It all kicks off in 2019. That's when Ladakh was separated from the former state of Jammu and Kashmir and made its own union territory. But here's the crucial part. It was created without its own legislative assembly. So for the next 6 years, you see this dissatisfaction just building and building over the lack of local control, job security, land rights, and all of that finally boiled over into the mass protests we saw in September 2025. And that brings us right to the breaking point. So, what do the protesters actually want? What was it that fueled these massive demonstrations? Well, a huge catalyst was the hunger strike by Sonam Wangchuk. Now, this is a world-renowned engineer and environmental activist we're talking about. His protest was super high profile, and it brought a ton of national attention to their cause. It gave the whole movement this incredible momentum. And then, his arrest, under the pretty controversial National Security Act, that was really the spark that lit the whole fuse. Now, one of their central demands, you'll hear this a lot, is inclusion in the 6th schedule. So what is that? It's a really key provision in India's constitution, and it's specifically designed to protect tribal areas. It gives them a ton of autonomy, letting local communities make their own laws on things like land use, forests, cultural practices, all that stuff. For a place like Ladakh, with its unique tribal identity and its super fragile high-altitude desert ecosystem, this is seen as an absolutely vital safeguard. So let's just break it all down. There are basically 4 key demands on the table. Number 1, they want full statehood, which would give them their own elected legislature. 2, inclusion under that protective 6th schedule we just talked about. 3, job quotas, to make sure local residents actually get jobs. And finally, number 4, they want much stronger legal safeguards to protect their land and their rights from outside influence and development. But here's the thing. This isn't just some local dispute over rights. To get the full picture, we really have to zoom out, because Ladakh sits right on top of a major geopolitical fault line, and the tremors from all this unrest, they're being felt way, way beyond its borders. And this is why. It's called the Line of Actual Control, or the LAC. This is the de facto border between India and China, a leftover from their war back in 1962. We're talking thousands of kilometers long, most of it isn't even properly marked, and it's one of the most heavily militarized frontiers on the entire planet. A huge chunk of the LAC runs right through Ladakh, putting it dead center in this incredibly high-stakes standoff. And this is where you see the core conflict, right? On one side, you've got the local grievances, people demanding political representation, wanting to protect their unique land and their culture. And on the other side, you have the government's massive national security concerns. For them, Ladakh is the front line against China, it's a vital military buffer, and it has immense strategic value to New Delhi. Two very different realities.
And believe me, that border is incredibly tense. Ladakh is absolutely central to the ongoing dispute between India and China. And get this, while all this internal unrest was going on, both military and diplomatic talks were starting up again in that very same area. So you can just imagine how having this kind of instability inside Ladakh adds a really dangerous layer of complexity to negotiations that are already super sensitive.
So when you have these intense local pressures and these huge geopolitical pressures colliding like this, well, the future for Ladakh is deeply unsettled. Let's take a look at what the stakes are for everyone involved. Okay, let's break down the stakes here. For the local population, all this unrest could definitely deepen resentment. But, it could also win wider support for what they're demanding. For India's government, this is a huge test of how to manage these incredibly sensitive border regions. For the military, it means they have to split their focus between keeping things stable internally and watching that external threat from China. And for India-China relations, this just adds a dangerous new wild card to an already tense situation. And all of this leaves us with one final, really crucial question. When you're talking about one of the world's most sensitive and strategic borderlands, how does a nation balance the fundamental rights and the dreams of its local people with the overwhelming demands of national security? There are just no easy answers here, and the entire future of Ladakh really hangs in that very delicate balance.